Welcome, everybody, to Radicalized Truth Survives, where you know we got your back. I'm here with my pals and co-hosts, Jim Stewartson and High Fidelity. Jim, as you know, is a disinformation researcher and filmmaker. Hi-Fi is a iced tea swiggin' technologist. We are a show that exposes disinformation and the agent provocateurs behind disinformation. And we have a most stunning guest for you. We have war correspondent John Sweeney. He's written a new book called Killer in the Kremlin. We are going to really dissect Vladimir Putin. And it's very important that you guys know that he not only doorstepped Vladimir Putin and almost puked on him, but he also managed to piss off Trump. And so this is going to be, I mean, he's going back and forth from Kyiv. He's bringing us stories from the war. He's been a war correspondent for 40 years, and we are so lucky to have him. So you're going to want to hang on every single word of that. And that's the intro, gentlemen. And let's get right into Front Loaded.
Front Loaded.
All right. All I want to say is happy anniversary to me. I am celebrating 6 years of being a journo activist. At 3:02 on September 17th, 2016, I pressed send on my first anti-Trump blog. And as I shared with the gentleman and John, that was the beginning of the end of an old life and the beginning of a very new life. And as the gentlemen know, this life is not without sacrifice. But I get to hang out with dudes like this, and I am very, very proud and happy to be one of the people in this battle for truth to make it past November 9th. Marty sent me a really beautiful poem, which was super meaningful. The very first blog, anti-Trump blog I wrote was called Douchebaggery and Other Things I Resigned From. It talked about the decline of my newsroom. And I was somebody who had investigated Trump for 20 years on and off and knew him to be a fraud and a con. And quite frankly, I just didn't want somebody who owned beauty pageants to be in our White House. So that was the very beginning for me. But I want to reach.
Seems like a fair point. I'm just saying.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, guys. Yeah, 6 years of this, man. What a grind, 24/7, you know? But I do want to share with you guys a couple words that I think sort of summarize this fight for me. A gentleman signed my Project Alamo petition, which was a 2017 petition I wrote early in spring. I wanted to see all the dark ads from the Trump campaign from Project Alamo, and I wanted to see them side by side with Russian propaganda because it was my thinking that there was some overlap there. And this gentleman from the UK signed my petition with these words on May 13th, 2017. This is about transparency and democracy, political integrity, and the future direction of our world and society. A political electoral system that is maintained by lies and misinformation to retain power without having the courage to stand up to scrutiny regarding its claims is an abhorrence which must be nipped in the bud. You have here an opportunity to make a stand for ethics and a set of values in defense of a non-totalitarian or repressive regime. You have this power at this juncture. Please use it wisely, as eventually your decision will be judged by history as long as we are still permitted to think for ourselves. This
Solid.
This gentleman was the first person to appear on my timeline and tell me that Brexit was the same thing that had happened to us. He connected me immediately with Carol Cadwalader. That connection brought me and a bunch of folks in the UK together. And of course, as you guys know, I've been writing for Byline Times ever since. But how about that?
Yeah. I mean, Brexit was just practice, right? I mean, it was a necessary step for Putin because it destabilized Europe, which is what he needed in order for him to do what he's trying to do in Ukraine.
That's right.
It's all absolutely connected, and the entire Brexit campaign was based on Cambridge Analytica and Russian data.
That's right.
It's just the same as it was in America. It's the same stuff.
It was that was just I read that and I felt a lot of us who are in this fight, you know, particularly the early days, I didn't have any support in my home. You know what I mean? And when I got those words, it was like validation that I was on the right path and that I was, you know, as seriously as I was taking it was warranted. And it still means the world to me. So I just want to share with you guys a couple other quick items as the war is heating up. This information war and this as we approach the midterms, a lot of anonymous junk accounts are pouring onto Twitter's front lines right now. Like I have to block and block and block. I spend more time blocking than tweeting. And I had a thought, why can't we lobby to get trolls registered as foreign fucking agents? Because that's what they are. They are trying to beam harms and despair into our minds. And I don't want us to be distracted from the fight. But what these are foreign agents.
They're literally foreign agents. Look, I have a whole ass crew, a bunch of them, you know, dozens and dozens of actual individuals devoted to me personally. Yeah. It's fucking bizarre. But besides all that, like almost none of them actually live in the fucking United States. And they're super interested in politics here, right? Like, oh, I live, you know, I'm from Sweden and I live in Brussels, but I really, really give a shit about, you know, who Q is or who this guy, like, it's so fucking blatant, and you're exactly right. I mean, this motherfucker, by the way, and I'm not naming names, is fundraising off of trolling me. It's incredible.
You should feel honored that Vladimir Putin is spending $17.69 to get all these people chasing you around the internet. I mean, that's a badge of honor, my friend.
That's about that. You know, that's about what he's get. You know, at this point, you know, what the value. That's a value. I mean, these fuckers are just. Anyway, yes. I agree, Heidi. Not just conceptually and, you know, humorously. Actually, these fucking people are being paid to hurt American citizens on behalf of an enemy nation state. That's a fucking problem, an actual problem.
Right. I was serious when I said that. I stand by it. I just want people to not be so easily fooled anymore. Most of these accounts are talking to themselves. They go after people who do good work. And God forbid you're a woman in the space who actually gets gainful employment, which is not easy to come by as an activist. They will try to get you fired and make it so toxic that people don't want to be around you. We've all suffered that. We've all been through it. And I say we got to fight fucking back with the laws we have. They're foreign agents. Let's recognize them as foreign agents. These anonymous junk accounts wield way too much power, and let's try to siphon some of that off. So, welcome to my first TED Talk of the episode.
I love that TED Talk, but it's not only the junk ones, right? It's the how do you say blue check again?
Oh yes,
Come on,
Galachka.
Yeah.
Say again.
Sinye Galachka.
Sinye Galachka, motherfuckers.
Well, that is.
Anyway,
that's the operation.
Deep breath.
If I'm remembering that right,
let's get to John Sweeney. John Sweeney.
But that's the operation, because there are a bunch of anonymous junk accounts that then get validation because one blue check will be assigned to them to give them validation. That's 100%. The game. Let's be smarter. We're going to talk a little bit about elite defection with John Sweeney, but I just want you guys to know I'm documenting the elite defection that Ruth Ben-Ghiat told us to be on the lookout for. There are lots of evidence that Putin's chosen fellows are actually meeting untimely deaths. We talked about it on Radpod and Chill. It's a story we're going to be focusing on. Onward to victory and onward to word phrase of the week.
The Russian window scandal is really. I'm telling you, the Russian window industry. It's a huge scandal coming.
I firmly expect the Russian government to pass much stricter measures with regards to window construction.
Well,
Windows safety is I think the number one political concern in Russia right now. So.
And also how fascinating from John, we learned that he believes some of these people are indeed taking their own lives. And that's going to be a little tease to John Sweeney's brilliant interview. Okay, so let's do it. Hi-Fi.
Word phrase of the week this week. Word phrase of the week this week. Well, it has to do with all those people who are complaining about sending money to Ukraine, who are complaining, why are we doing anything in Ukraine? The word phrase this week is appeasement. And appeasement, it's a diplomatic policy of letting the bullies bully in the hopes that they'll leave you alone.
Right.
Guess what? Well, you can ask Neville Chamberlain how that worked out, right? Yeah. So that is our word phrase of the week this week. It's a word you should know. Letting the bullies bully in the hopes they won't bully you never, ever works.
Fascism does not stop on its own. It has to be defeated. Right. So what's fascinating though is yes, appeasement is absolutely a problem, and there are quote mainstream people who are doing that, right? But the right wing has gone past appeasement straight to treasonment, right?
That's right.
They're not appeasing anything. They're not complaining about the budget. They're like Zelensky, Zanatsky, and Natsky.
Well, okay, so let's give our viewers a bonus word phrase of the week, shall we? Because it's one of your favorite words.
I love this word.
Here's the bonus for the week: Quisling.
Mm-hmm.
Quisling.
Yeah. Traitors.
Is someone who actively, not necessarily a traitor exactly, but somebody who is willing to go along with the program because they believe that it's in their own best interest and fuck everybody who's going to get murdered or whatever.
Which
and a little bit of history.
There we go. Yeah.
Here's
where it comes from.
So if you want to be like this motherfucker, keep coming after us, keep coming at, keep like spending your time fucking with people who are trying to fix things, put that on your fucking avatar instead of
I love that.
Whatever your bullshit is this week.
Dog or cat or some superhero. So I like how it's so obvious to anybody paying any attention that the GOP wants Putin to win because of oil, bigotry, compromat, that would be my top three. And
it's existential now, right?
Yeah, right.
They all know that they're traitors, and they all know that we know that they're traitors, and so all they can do is win, right? That's why you have to defeat it.
That's right.
Because it's deep.
That's right. Actually, it's funny, Jim, because I had wanted John Sweeney to say this in our interview, but he basically said, we have to defeat these people because they're evil. That has been a mantra on this show for some time. Okay, so hi-fi. Thank you for that. Always informative. Let's get on to why it matters.
Why does it matter? Why does it matter? Why high fidelity?
First story this week, fossil fuel fuckery. What am I talking about? Well, on the House Committee of Oversight and Reform, they just released a bunch of emails and internal messaging amongst petroleum companies that, they were gaslighting us. They've been lying to us. They've been trying to not hold up their end of the bargain when it comes to meeting climate change goals. Basically, serious fuckery. Why does this matter? It's killing the planet, and these petroleum companies are paying for quite a bit of the fascist movement.
Yeah. They pay billions to interfere with our knowledge of science. There's no question
absolutely
about that.
And listen, Christo-fascist ideology is all about the apocalypse, right? It's all about the end times. It's all about, the new apostolic reformation bullshit that's driving a lot of this. Is all about literally pushing us towards the end times, pushing us towards chaos, towards the tribulation, towards whatever the fuck your particular flavor of this nonsense is. The reason why the oil and gas industry, has built that cult effectively is because it serves their interest, because they want global warming. They want to heat up the planet. They do not want economical and ecological solutions, because it hurts the value of the gold that they still have in the fucking planet. And this is really important because it shows the not only hypocrisy but the genocidal actions of these motherfuckers, and frankly, they should be tried as such.
And even blurry.
TED Talk number one.
That was TED Talk number one. Yeah. I love this show. We have so
Next
much
story
fun.
this week. Who's hacking the hackers? And this has to do with, in court this week, the hacker who was able to access 57 million users' records from Uber in 2016 detailed what exactly went down. And the reason this is important is because the person who was the chief security officer of Uber at the time, Joseph Sullivan, he covered it up to the feds and lied about it and obfuscated. And this is bad. And why is this bad? Well, let me tell you why it's bad, because guess what just happened? Uber just got hacked again. Yes, that's right. Whole bunch more of your data, listeners. If you're an Uber user, it's now out there on the World Wide Web. I'm sure eventually it will end up in some probably Russian data center somewhere. So enjoy.
Wow.
No, of course it will. That's, look, I was around Silicon Valley when all of these idiots were starting their companies in the 90s, right? These were just kids, right? They were kids who started these fucking companies. Travis Kalanick, I'm sorry, but that dude had no fucking business running a company that touches so many people, right? Same with Mark Zuckerberg. These people are put in there to develop these enormous companies, to develop this quote value for their investors, which is really smoke and mirrors designed to suck data out of the American population and ultimately burn all the people who follow that money into the burning pit that Uber is about to become. Thank you for coming to my second TED Talk.
And the addendum to the second TED Talk is, here's the thing about that data. If you don't understand by now that you are being targeted by companies like Cambridge Analytica, who is developing a psychographic profile on you using their Oceans method or even more advanced method. There are psychologists, data scientists. Jackie Singh told us about this. There are PhDs out there trying to figure out how to crack open your brain and dump what they want into it.
That's
It's more, as we're going to talk about in Hellscape, it's more than that. This is military psychological operations. Let's be real clear. This is these people know exactly what they're doing. It's what me and a lot of other people, have been saying with a great deal of resistance. This is not some fucking conspiracy theory started by a 4chan troll. This is military psychological warfare tactics being used against American citizens. And until we actually grapple with that, we're just going to sit here in stunned, silence, wondering what the fuck is going on. But what's going on is that you are being attacked. All of us are being attacked, and we need to wake up to that fact, whether it's coming through these fucking companies, like this, or whether it's coming through Twitter DMs.
There you have it. All right. Last story this week.
TED Talk number 2.
Finally
3?
wrapped up. All right.
Shit.
All right. 2.5, 2.75, something like that. Anyway,
I love
final
it.
story this week. Peter Thiel's mouth. Yes, it is kind of like the mouth of Sauron because it's about Blake Masters out in Arizona. And this is why this story matters. Blake Masters wants to fire all the generals. One of the few things that stood in the breach on January 6th was men of conscience and women of conscience in our military, men of conscience and women of conscience of our Capitol Police. I don't think people need to be reminded we were 42 feet away from Vice Pence being murdered and us losing our democracy. And Blake Masters is out here saying we need to take the military because next time they won't stand in our way.
Yeah, well, another dangerous propagandist.
I mean, Peter Thiel, trains with his buddy Eric Prince these fucking androids like J.D. Vance and Blake Masters and a whole bunch of other ones that aren't quite as blatantly funded by him to go out there and try to out Peter each other, right? Peter Thiel is an accelerationist, psychopath who profits from the world burning, right? And Peter Thiel says that democracy and freedom are incompatible. So he trains these fucking androids like Blake Masters to go out there and do and say what's in his fucking head, right? And that's what's in his head. He wants to take over the military with his buddy and give it to Michael Flynn. That's what he wants. That's what's going on here. And we got to get people who are just paid by billionaires to be psychopaths and traumatize the American public. We can't have that be illegal in America. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. TED Talk 3.5, 4.5, 4. No, thank you, Jim. Seriously, I believe that American democracy and Peter Thiel are incompatible. And I think we need to make some moves. We need to make some moves on that. All right. Thank you for that incredibly brilliant Why It Matters. I also appreciate that. I know that the show that we do, we know we're watched by media and we know that we do have some impact, but I think it's very important that Tim Ryan agrees with us and what we just pointed out. And there's a tweet to that effect. So fantastic. Let's jump right into Sean's brief legal briefs.
Brief legal briefs.
Actually, I'm going to take over for Sean on this one because this one is kind of blowing my mind, folks. I mean, Fifth Circuit gonna Fifth Circuit all you want, but Texas passed a social media law that says no company can censor anyone on their platforms. I mean, this is big government. This is government telling a private business how to run their business, and yet for some reason, the Fifth Circuit says, the First Amendment rights of the users outweigh the First Amendment rights of the platform.
Wow.
I don't get it, folks.
Wow.
But this is going to lead to more hate speech. This is going to be, more anti-Semitism, more racism, more sexism. Yeah, it's not a good thing, people.
That gentleman, that hairy eyeball gentleman we were just looking at, boy, is his backstory fascinating. That is, go ahead.
There has been a lawsuit pending against Ken Paxton for 7 years in Texas right now.
Yeah.
7 years. Delay. Ever heard that? Anyway.
Yeah. So Texas has a lot more blue than people realize, and the people there have been trying to fight these, what we can only call fascists. I don't know any other way to describe them.
I just want to say briefly about Texas. Governor Abbott using human beings.
He was human trafficking.
Actual weapons, political weapons, right?
Right.
I mean, the most despicable, degrading, possible thing imaginable. But listen, the good news is people on Martha's Vineyard, I've been, I have relatives who live there. It's a nice place, right? You know, it's privileged and all that, whatever. They took care of them. They took care of those people.
Yeah. Right.
Because they're just American citizens who are like, why did you do that? What the fuck is wrong with you? These are nice people who are trying to seek refuge in the United States, as it says on the link on the fucking Statue of Liberty, as it says in the Constitution.
Yeah.
Well, as Monique Kamara has pointed out, one of their tactics is the weaponization of everything. And you can look across Europe and the United States to see how the fact of immigration has been weaponized to cause a certain percentage of the people of a country across the globe to freak out.
Well, in addition, we are all very distracted this week, right? So what are they really doing? They're trying to destroy our democracy while we all are outraged. And here's the other thing. These are desperate acts by desperate men. We've got to stop thinking that these are some kind of masters of the universe. Ron DeSantis and Abbott, you know, they're running out of plot lines when they default to this kind of stuff. So speaking of desperate men, I've got a quick brief legal brief too before we get into hellscape. I know everyone's very upset because a Russian billionaire is suing French customs for seizing his yachts. He's going to get a decision. This poor guy, Alexei Kuzmikev, I'm sure that's not how you say it, although it's very important to note that he is a main shareholder of Russia's Alpha Bank. You know, he's been sanctioned in the EU. These guys are having a hard time, and he really wants his yachts back. And so they will be making a decision on that on October 5th, and we will be reporting that right here. But good luck to you, Alexei.
And here's hoping the French court says, too fucking bad, dude.
In French, of course. All right, so let's get into hellscape.
Jim Stewart's hellscape. Oh.
I'm going to do something unusual, which is talk a little bit about some good news.
Good news.
My little buddy here is like, hey, you know, look, there's a lot of things unfolding, a lot of big moves being made. But there's a lot of good news, and you know, John Sweeney knows some of that good news in terms of what's happening in Russia. Ukraine is just kicking, you know, the Russian army's ass because the Russian army does not want to fucking be there.
That's right.
Right? They know it's just a raw power move, right? And Putin is paying the price, and so are the people around him. You know, it makes him a very dangerous animal because he's trapped. But the other thing is that his people in America, which give him a lot of his power, and let's be clear about that. Mike Flynn, Bannon, all of his allies, Peter Thiel, all of his allies in America are having a much harder time, right? And some of them, well, Donald Trump is about to be indicted and arrested, and so that's putting a lot of pressure on them, and so that makes this a scary time. But I think it's important to recognize that the landscape is changing, both in terms of the information landscape and the geopolitical landscape. And I wanted to play a clip, and hopefully we have that hi-fi, of a documentary by my friend Marley Clements and Bayan Junan, who are both absolutely incredible. And they interviewed Major General Paul Eaton.
Major General Paul Eaton. I am married to an Army veteran, 3 children, all soldiers.
What role do you see QAnon playing in January 6th?
This propagation of conspiracy theories that they pushed out, they were able to get a following. They were able to create a cult-like following.
Yeah. You use the word cult-like in describing QAnon. Another word we hear quite a bit is PSYOP, which is a military term. Can you tell us what that means?
Whenever you have an op plan, you have a PSYOP component to it and information warfare. A PSYOP campaign used to be dropping leaflets behind the lines during World War I. Now it's the internet and all the tools available to it. So this whole PSYOP thing is being developed to a degree that is pretty scary right now.
Are you familiar with the Reawaken tour that's happening across America right now?
Scary stuff.
General Flynn gets on stage, reminds everybody that they are part of his digital insurgency, but they are now spiritual warriors. We are now engaged in spiritual warfare. What do you make of that?
It's dangerous. When you're talking about a reinforcing function of a big tent revival, reawaken, call it what you will, that is a reindoctrinating event. When you talk about Flynn generating a digital army, every one of those people is a potential foot soldier available to General X Flynn. That's the scary part of all of this. Mike Flynn, at one time, was a very respected general officer.
Do you think there could be an element of him having been psyoped?
I mean, he sat down to break bread with Vladimir Putin, so there were plenty of opportunities, but the question that you pose should be posed to the Secretary of Defense. What are you doing about this renegade retired lieutenant general? That is a great mystery to all of us. Mr. Flynn should be brought back on active duty and given a trial for offenses that I believe he has committed.
Well, thank you, General Eaton, for your service and for speaking the truth. This is my Twitter account before 2 weeks before I was inauthentically banned by a bunch of trolls in cooperation with Twitter safety. As you can see, here's Mike Flynn and this nice lady who was a Bernie supporter until Mike Flynn got a hold of her, and then she died of COVID. This was my pinned tweet for a year. This tweet exactly a week after the insurrection. It was QAnon. It was a cult. It was a psyop. It was a result of a psychological operation by a foreign power with the aid of domestic terrorists. This is, and as you can see, I had this podcast right here in my bio. So if you're wondering why we're getting attacked, it's because we've all been ahead of this story for a long time. But I wanted to take this opportunity because it does appear, thank goodness, that the landscape is changing. And that's excellent news. And there's another part of the story that is going well at the same time. Namely, the DOJ, our government, and the press for that matter, seems to be breaking through a wall of misunderstanding about what's actually going on here. So it started for me when the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers got arrested on seditious conspiracy charges, which is no joke. Like, that's a big deal, right? And that was a signal to me that Merrick Garland was not fucking around. The January 6th committee came in. Mar-a-Lago gets searched. 40 of Trump's operatives get searched, many of them connected to Flynn, including my fascist Mike Lindell. And then this documentary comes out and just explodes the idea that Mike Flynn is just grifting off of QAnon or that he's just some renegade crazy general. It's 4 hours of nailing Mike Flynn's bullshit to the wall. So I just wanted to share for, a rare break from my usual, hell is freezing over. I mean, it certainly is in some ways, but for fuck's sake, the Democrats are up in a midterm election with a Democrat in power. Putin's getting his ass kicked. We've got a chance here, and I just want to emphasize, it's just a chance, right? We're not out of the woods yet. This is not me saying, hey, everybody relax. This is me saying, remember, again, fascism does not stop on its own. You cannot go halfway. We cannot search these people and then do nothing. We have got to move forward and put them away. That's what has to happen. Start with Michael Flynn, Donald Trump, all the rest of them as well. But you got to get the head of the snake. And that is my hellscape for today.
Amen, brother. Amen.
All right, then.
That was incredible.
Let's do the thing.
Okay, we are so excited to introduce our guest to our just another incredible guest, John Sweeney. He's a war correspondent. His new book, Killer in the Kremlin, is something we're going to be talking about. I've been following John for a while, but I just listened to an interview with him from Kiev that was with our friend Zarina, and it was so beautiful and so such a beautiful tribute to the Ukrainian people. I immediately wanted to have him on our show. And before we introduce you guys to John formally, please watch this clip from him on Twitter where he's commenting on a recent meeting that took place between Putin and Xi and other gangsters.
Vladimir Putin, the other day, there was a kind of picture of him and President Xi, the strongman of China, Lukashenko, the absurd pig farmer dictator of Belarus, and other dictators from the ex-Soviet space. None of them were wearing ties. Do fuck off. We instead wear a black tie for a couple of days. Although I never wear a tie, I am now, partly because Vladimir Putin's wearing a tie. What was funny was that they wanted to project some kind of dark power, but what they looked like was a bunch of gangsters who weren't doing very well. Al Capone, just before the taxman came a-knocking, the Gambinos before John Gotti started spilling the beans. I think that Putin knows he's running out of time, and that is incredibly exciting.
Welcome, John. I just wanted you to share with our viewers what prompted you to create that clip. What was going through your head at that moment?
So I've written this book, Killer in the Kremlin. It's coming out officially in the States, I think October the 15th. Here it is. As you can tell from the title, it's broadly supportive. Ha ha ha.
Well received in Moscow, was it?
I'm on. People ask me, "Aren't you a little bit scared?" And I think I'm on the Kremlin death list, but I'm like 994. There's a ton of brilliant Ukrainians and some Russians and some Americans, and then I'm somewhere in the 900s. I think that they won't like the book, but remember that I'm British and I've written it in English. However, it's absolutely true to say that before Vladimir Putin was a spy, he fell in with gangsters. So what
what propelled Putin out of his horribly poor and almost certainly abusive and in some way dark and bad upbringing was that in then Leningrad, he joined a kind of judo club. It's mixed martial arts, they call it Sambo. And the guy who ran the club was a mafiosa, whose name was, I think, was Leon the Sportsman. And when this guy died, on his website it said, "I'm dead, but the mafia continues." So when you think about Putin, before he goes KGB, he's a gangster, and the gangster, Leon the Sportsman, gets him into university on an athletic scholarship. And from there, he gets himself into the KGB. But at the heart, at the core of Putinism is gangsterism. And what's happened is gangsters have taken over the Russian secret state, which was already that way inclined anyway. But so Putinism is a weird blending, like whiskey, but a blending of the KGB secret state and gangsterism. And there he was with Xi and, a bunch of other dictators from the former Soviet space. And I just thought, well, blow me down. What a bunch of gangsters. I also thought, obviously I'm wearing a black T-shirt because I've run out of white shirts. Like tomorrow, I'll wear a white shirt and a black tie. But we're in mourning for the Queen, for Mrs. Queen, as I like to talk. She was a good woman. I'm not a full-blown royalist, but I do like the royal family in general, Prince Andrew accepted. And I really, really admired the Queen. I think she gave she was a great public servant for 7 decades. And she was a nice, decent human being. And what's surprising is how much it's hit us all in London. And at the same time, I am drawn to reflect the difference, like that when someone like the Queen dies, an awful lot of people around the world feel genuinely sorry and want to pay their respects. And when Vladimir Putin goes to hell, can I swear, by the way, on this podcast?
Oh, yes, we're very sweary. Very sweary.
Fuck, man.
Please, by all means.
So when Vladimir Putin fucks off to hell where he fucking belongs, then I don't think there'll be some lunatics in Moscow who will be sad, but there will be nothing like the global outpouring of grief for our dear Queen.
I predict fireworks personally. That
was beautifully stated as Hillary Clinton.
That's a promo clip right there.
Right, I know.
Vladimir Putin fucks off to hell.
Let's all have a drink, a toast to Vladimir Putin fucking off to hell. As Hillary Clinton once said, he fears the Gaddafi ending. And I think that fear is getting quite real for him. And I look so forward to speaking with you about that.
It's not a case. Cheers. And Her Majesty Queen, God bless your soul.
Yes.
I'm drinking, by the way. This is a kind of marmalade gin, which is, this Paddington Bear took part. So I just swallowed an ice cube, and I'm trying to deal with the ice cube and talk to you at the same time. By the way, it's whatever.
The ice cube is more important right now. Please take that first.
In London, it's 10 o'clock, so it's okay.
It's 10 o'clock. Okay.
But the panic. So it's kind of marmalade-y, ginny thingy, and the thing is that the guy who wrote that is a friend of mine. He also wrote the Bond sequence just before the London Olympics, where the Queen appears. Bond picks her up, and they go and Bond doesn't like the corgis, and then he picks up and they go on a helicopter, and it looks as though she jumps out the helicopter first, and all that kind of stuff. And the guy who wrote that is a wonderful writer called Frank Cottrell Boyce. He also wrote for her Jubilee this clip from Paddington Bear, and Paddington Bear comes along and drinks tea with the Queen. And apparently she was, I mean, Frank didn't know what to write to the Queen, but there was a message from the palace that she was up for it. She was actually quite like the idea. She wanted to be an actor or actress when she was very young, and obviously that couldn't happen. But she was up for doing lines, and so and also the acting there is that she's dealing. Obviously, there's somebody pretending to be Paddington because Paddington is added in later, but she's being, you know, really rather good at doing all this stuff. But remember that Paddington Bear is from darkest Peru. He originally written on and he saw some kids who were Jewish kinder transport kids at a railway station in London arriving, and it triggered something, and that's the story of Paddington Bear.
Wow.
A sweet animal, but nevertheless, if you love Paddington, you're loving the different, the other, which is entirely what people like Vladimir Trump and Donald Putin. Have I got that right? This is really
you do. You got it right.
they
close enough. Yeah.
In their revolting, dark populism, they try and get ordinary people to hate the different and the other, and the Queen was not on their side.
Well, I'm so glad that you shared that profound story with us, and we also know the preferred drink of war correspondence. I am looking so forward to you dropping some knowledge on our viewers, because I've been a journalist a long time, and my palette has been largely Southern California, as well as, you know, global issues, but there's nothing like traveling. And I so want to go to Ukraine. And I was just looking at the list of recommendations. And number one was, if you decide you want to ignore our warning, get a will, you know, tell your children your passcodes. You know, I was like, oh man, but here you are, somebody who's lived that life, a life that, you know, has been celebrated in literature, romanticized, but you've really been there. And when you were talking about Putin and what you saw in 99 and how he was set up and all the journalists who died trying to report this, I think it's so important that we offer our viewers who are global a refresher course on that killer in the Kremlin.
Well, yes. So, by the way, everybody should know I'm in London, but slightly weirdly, I commute between London and Kyiv, and I'm going back there later this month. But what I'm doing is I do little films on Twitter when I'm properly in Ukraine. I do kind of war diaries on Twitter, and then if there are patrons out there who can afford to bung me a quid or two or $1 or two, that would be lovely. But essentially, it's extremely important for me to tell the story that Vladimir Putin is a war criminal, because I first said it, not actually in 99, but in 2000. There were two awful things that happened. Yeltsin, towards the end of it, Yeltsin had been a great and good man, and then he drank himself into a kind of awful alcoholic senility. And his family was corrupt. And there's a moment when he gives the crown or the key to the Kremlin to Vladimir Putin, who's a nobody. He just looks like a cheap secret policeman in a nasty suit. It's a reversion back to the Soviet time. It's an awful mistake. And his polling number's like 2%. And somebody said, this isn't going to work unless something extraordinary happens. And then something extraordinary did happen. Chechen terrorists blew up a series of apartment blocks in southern Russia and in Moscow, killing around 300 people. And then Putin goes out and said, we're going to wipe these bastards out on the shitter, in gangster speak, because he's a gangster. Or did that happen? The reality is, and I think the evidence for this is overwhelming, is that the Moscow apartment bombs blown up in September 1999 were a black operation by the KGB/FSB that effectively Vladimir Putin blew up Russia, blamed it on the Chechens, launched the Second Chechen War, which the Russian army prosecuted with a pitiless barbarity. And so Vladimir Putin's original sin is murdering fellow Russians to make him look good. And that's how his rule starts. I go to Russia in February 2000, and I go to Chechnya undercover twice in that year, but first time in February 2000, and I see compelling evidence of Russian army war crimes against Chechen civilians, including the shooting up and bombing of a white flag refugee convoy of Chechen civilians. I interviewed a little girl of 8, and she was the only survivor in her car. Her mother, her father, her brothers, a cousin were all killed. She survived. She was lying, she's tiny, she was like 8 years old, lying on the back of the Volga car. And when the bomb fell, killing everybody else, it blew the back window out and she survived. And when I saw her face, was horribly burned. And then I came back to London. I was writing for the Observer before I joined the BBC. And I wrote a report calling Vladimir Putin a war criminal in March 2000. I was the first person, as far as I can understand, in the West to call him a war criminal, the first reporter to call him a war criminal. And nobody fucking listened to me. It wasn't good. And so 22 years later, I'm in Kyiv. I go to Kyiv before the war. I arrive on Valentine's Day. I've had some bad Valentine's Days in my life, but this was a bad one. But even so, I stay there. And then I see reports of the Russian army killing refugees. And then I see it with my own eyes. I go to, when the Russian army leaves in early April, I go to Bucha and I go to Borodenka and I pass cars with Jetty on it. Jetty means children in Russian. I don't shoot. And there are bullets in the windscreen, bullets down the side of the car. Again and again and again. War crime on repeat, on repeat, on repeat. So what we're looking at is a serial killer. But Joe Biden was once asked, do you think Vladimir Putin's a killer? And Joe Biden, who I think is a good man, he said, yeah, I do. And I think Joe Biden's wrong about that. I do not think Vladimir Putin is a killer. He's a serial killer. You're all nodding like nodding dogs.
The reason we do that is to let it breathe.
Aha.
These are such incredibly important, vital points. And, the gentlemen know that yesterday was the 6th anniversary of me going public as a veteran investigative reporter with my first anti-Trump blog. And that was both the end of an old life and the beginning of a new life. But again, you've been doing this type of reporting for 40 years. So your experience is so incredibly vital. I would love for you to share your Zelensky in the tube story and what he said about words and how words have the potency. And I'll let you tell the story. But that was just a profound moment. Yes, go ahead, Jim.
I'm sorry for the letting the moment breathe there, but that was absolutely incredible and very, very relevant, obviously, to the danger we're facing today. And I just wanted to ask you to reflect for a second on what that story means about what he may do now. Yeah. Because my big concern is, well, yes, he is absolutely on the ropes. He is absolutely, in trouble in many different ways. That means he's a cornered animal, and he does have biological, chemical, nuclear weapons in his arsenal. And I apologize for going off course, Heidi.
No, it's cool. We're so excited, and these minutes go so fast.
I wanted to just get your reflection on what that means about where we are right now.
So the problem, Jim, is that he's a creature who has used fear to bully, intimidate, and frighten the West for 22 years. And time again, when he's killed people, for example, British citizens, the response of British prime ministers has been to back off, because he's the guy you don't want to fight with. And there's something else as well. Dark Russian money is very powerful and very strong.
Yeah.
And by the way, I can hear a little bit of, anyway, it's gone away. The dark Russian money is very powerful and very strong, but also, so there is a strange mixture of both timidity and greed in our relationships, or our leaders' relationships with Vladimir Putin. And fear is the biggest single thing that he brings to the table. And it's like you meet somebody who's so psychotic that you just want to back off. Okay, I don't want to do this. Okay, I get it. Okay, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. And the problem is he's a serial killer. So he just keeps on pushing. In my book, doing it one more time. Yes. Out of the States, October the 15th, I think.
I've already pre-ordered on Amazon. You're good, man.
Yeah, lovely.
We put links to your Patreon. We put links to your book in our description of this. So we got you.
By the way,
we got your back.
What's good about Americans is they understand the power of the market. You've got a lot. You've got another. By the way, I'd like to invite you right now to confess that you made a great mistake in 1776, and you really, really shouldn't throw tea into the sea. Waste of a good cuppa. So,
what we should have done is stolen it and used it for ourselves. I just
yeah. But don't throw tea in the sea. Anyway,
right, that I agree with you.
Sorry about that, man. We'll make up for it.
So going back to the issue, the critical issue, what does Putin do next? Because he's a cornered bear, a cornered rat. He plays with fear, and that there's an element that there's a wonderful Russian American writer journalist, Masha Gessen, who's written a fantastic book in 2014 called Vladimir Putin, The Man Without a Face. Yeah. And she talks in the book about how Putin is not a proper kleptomaniac. He has pleonexia. I'd never heard the word before until I read Masha's book, but I have a chapter about pleonexia. Pleonexia is the irresistible urge to take something which properly belongs to another. And then what happens is Putin waits for the other person to react. And there's a couple of examples that Masha gives. There's a guy, I think he's called Robert Kraft, who's an American billionaire. Yeah, and he owns some New York baseball team. You know who I'm talking about, yeah?
We do.
So the story is he has a 120
NFL Super Bowl.
Yes, that guy. He has 125 carat ring, diamond ring. And when Kraft sees Putin in Moscow, he says, "Oh, look, you could kill somebody that's got the diamond's got so many sharp angles." Putin says, "Man, look at it." He takes the ring, puts it in his pocket, and walks away.
Yeah.
And Kraft doesn't know what to do. And then Kraft is left a couple of days later saying it was a gift. Putin goes to New York, goes to the Guggenheim Museum, and there's a kind of $400 piece of rubbish, which is a Kalashnikov rifle in glass filled with vodka. You can buy this in souvenir shops back in the day for $400. And Putin sees it, says, "Oh, that looks good. Can I have a look at this?" Picks it up. He likes it, gives it to one of his goons, who vanishes and disappears. And Putin has nicked this kind of piece of art, modern art, in the Guggenheim Museum. And nobody in the Guggenheim Museum, this is early days, like 2003, 2004, says, "You stole that, give it back to us."
Yeah.
That's what it's like. Yeah. And then these are Masha's examples, but I also think, I look at another version of pleonexia, is not directly stealing things from people, but actually arriving late for an arranged meeting, which is you're stealing the other person's peace of mind.
Yeah.
So he was 20 minutes late for the Queen. He was something like an hour late for the Pope, an hour and a half late for maybe an hour and 5 minutes late for Obama, an hour and a half late for the King of Spain, 4.5 hours late for Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, when she was. So that's what he's like. So the problem is that if you think the best way of dealing with him is giving him something, he'll take it and then he'll want something else. If you give him your car, he'll want your house. If you give him your house, he'll want your wife and then your children.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
How well did appeasement work for Chamberlain?
There's a complicated and nuanced argument to that, but essentially, the West screwed up and we let Hitler survive for far too long before we stood up to him.
That's right.
I have a saying that I say often, which is that you can't negotiate with fascism or appease it. You have to defeat it. You have to utterly defeat it, and you can never actually kill it, right? Because fascism is part of the human condition, sadly. But in these times, you have to look at it as something to beat. You cannot look at it as something to live with in any way. Apologies for the interruption.
Yeah, no, Jim, I agree with you. I've seen it in my own with my own eyes, and first Chechnya, and then multiple trips to Russia. But to get to the critical question is, what will Putin do now that he's losing the war, now that he's being humiliated on the world stage by the heroes in the Ukrainian army and the heroes in the Ukrainian in the Ukrainian population? Could he nuke us all? I don't think he's going to do that. And the reason I don't think he does that is that I think there are two, I quote them in my book, Killing the Kremlin, there are two great psychiatrists who study Putin a lot. One of them is based in, is Ukrainian. His name is Semyon Gluzman, and he was the first Soviet psychiatrist to stand up to the Soviet regime's abuse of psychiatry, actually against a great Soviet Ukrainian general, General Grigorenko, memory serves. And Semyon, for his courage, spent 10 years in the Gulag, often in a punishment cell, sometimes at minus 50 degrees. Hello, here's my dog. Hello, dog.
We like dogs. Dogs are allowed on the show, by the way.
Come on, America, listen, there's lots of people from Southern California want to see you.
And all over the world, by the way.
Anyway, he's, if I chase him, I'll just run away. He does not, and I asked him just before the war, by the way, so you know what happened was that I did a big report for, about Scientology. Scientology says that I'm psychotic, drunk, a liar, and a bigot. I say that Scientology is an evil space alien cult.
Okay, I have to bring something up here.
Yeah.
Lee Dundas, who is an attorney attached to Mike Flynn, who, as we know, was doing the QAnon Russian propaganda in the United States. Lee Dundas is from Scientology. Do you see a parallel? I mean, all these cults culting together.
Yes. I think that Putinism is very much a denial of the rational mind. Now, we can overdo this, and we should always act with some degree. We always should act with humanity and kindness and everything. For example, the Queen summed up in her great public service. But essentially, Putinism, there's a bit of it which is a cult. Alexander Dugin, his great propagandist, or his, Putin's brain, Putin's Rasputin, he was an enormous believer in occultism and this creepy weirdo called Aleister Crowley. And Aleister Crowley was a Satanist, and there's video, you can see it on YouTube, of Aleister Dugin in 1995 intoning in Russian Aleister Crowley's occult nonsense.
Yeah, it was an entire celebration. I have that video on my Substack. Slight plug for myself. I love.
So Aleister Crowley processed church.
Unfortunately, Jim, who has been targeted by a massive disinformation operation, he has unfortunately run into some of these characters and has a lot of experience with the Satanists in the mist here. So this is not something that is unusual to us.
Yeah. I've written a thriller as well, which is published. We're actually going to put it out under a different title shortly, but it's called, at the moment, it's called The Useful Idiot. And it's a thriller set in the Holodomor, and one of the baddie in it is Walter Duranty, who was the American New York Times reporter who told a great lie that there was no famine in Russia, in the Soviet Union, in Ukraine, in 1933, thanks to Stalin's collectivization of agriculture. Now, this was a great lie because there was a famine and maybe as many as 7 million people died, maybe 4 million Ukrainians, maybe 3 million Russians. Nobody knows for sure because nobody was counting. Wow. But Walter Duranty was great friends with Aleister Crowley. They used to, in Paris, they used to talk about the Paris workings. So there is this kind of horrible continuation of the fascination with the occult. But to get back to the new question, Vladimir Putin, will he, won't he nuke us all? I don't think so, because Semyon Gluzman, my friend, who's a great psychiatrist, who understands the mindset of the KGB, FSB, better than anyone else on earth, because he spent 10 years in prison guarded by them, does not think that he's mad. He's bad, but he doesn't think he's suicidal. I believe that Vladimir Putin has got like 7 children, maybe 9 children. He's got at least 2 or 3 boys. He does not want his kids to end up as ash. And I think he's still a rational actor, albeit with very, very limited understanding or intelligence of modernity, how the world really is. But he's still a rational actor and he's not suicidal. So, by the way, that is also the view of the professor of psychiatry, an eminent neuroscientist called Jim Fallon, who's a friend of mine who I also quote in the book. And he says the same thing as Semyon. As far as I can tell, Jim and Semyon are the 2 best psychiatrists in the world who have studied Vladimir Putin at great length, and they both say the same thing. He's a bad man, but he's not a madman. That's good. Secondly, I think that if Putin does hit the nuclear button, it won't be connected to the nuke. That somebody inside the Kremlin will have unglued the lead or whatever it is. And because Vladimir Putin had a much, much stronger influence on the Kremlin machinery on February the 23rd.
Yeah.
Does now on the February the 24th.
That's right.
Everybody can see this as a catastrophic mistake.
Yeah.
Thirdly, I understand that the CIA has told the Russians, if you use a tactical nuke on the battlefield, we will pound Russia with conventional cruise missiles, i.e. we won't escalate, but you won't like it. And we will hit the defense ministry and the Lubyanka, the headquarters of the KGB FSB. Fourthly, the Chinese will not like it. And the fascinating thing is that actually China's signaling is getting clearer and clearer. They were very happy for Vladimir Putin to destroy democratic Ukraine in 3 days. They're not happy if it's going to take a long, long time. And at the moment, it doesn't look like they're going to do that at all. So China's strategic interest is they do not like the West when we complain about what's happening to the Tibetans, the Uyghurs, Hong Kong, Chinese democracy. But they need our customers. Now, the Chinese economy is in serious trouble. I don't know if you saw the other day, there were pictures in the summer, in August, of the tributary to the Yangtze, which was bone dry. They have a real problem with energy at the moment because all of their hydroelectric stations are working properly.
Mm-hmm.
China's worried about a new world recession. If Putin uses a tactical nuke against Ukraine, it will cause almost certainly a recession in Europe, and that will cause enormous trouble for the Chinese Communist Party because the Chinese economy will start tanking. It's already in trouble. So they're saying to Putin, don't do it. Fifthly, he won't do it because the wind can also blow the other direction. And if you, for example, you do a Chernobyl at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, then it can easily blow another 300 miles to Rostov-on-Don. So one of the great cities in Russia will have a massive radiation problem. So for those 5 reasons, I do not think that Putin is going to use a nuclear weapon or create some kind of black flag nuclear accident, because the Chinese will be very, very angry with him, as will the Americans, as will the Europeans. And he doesn't dare do it.
Wow. Thank you so much for that response. And thank you, Jim, for that question. That's incredible. Now, I would love for you to share with us your firsthand insights into the spirit of the Ukrainian people, who are basically the front lines of defense for democracy, and those words that Zelensky said in the tube, because your insights to him and comparing him to Rowan Atkinson in a way, I think are things that we have not heard here yet stateside.
Okay, so I think it's in March. Zelensky, there's a ton of journalists. Quite a lot of journalists leave because the Russian army is there's this enormous armored column that's coming down through Chernobyl, 40 miles long, and at one point the Russian army is 12 miles from the center of Kyiv, and I'm in the center of Kyiv, and I on a daily basis do a podcast which begins. The electricity is still on, the internet is still on. There are no Russian tanks in my street, Krishatik, and I'm still wearing my lucky orange hat. My ex, we're still pals, who's actually living in the States right now, and she kept on texting me saying, "Get rid of that hat, Sweeney. You're a target. What are you doing? Bloody orange hat."
God bless her.
And I said, by the way, so you know what happened was that on day 2 of the war, I was arrested by a Ukrainian soldier, and I was, the reason I was doing this for my video for my Twitter videos. I film everything all the time, and he said, stop taking pictures of stop taking pictures. Yeah. And then I moved 100 yards, and then I carried on filming. And he said, and he came and found me and said, "Right, are you a Russian spy?" "Do I look like a Russian spy?" I said to him, "Never argue with a Ukrainian with a loaded machine gun."
That's good life advice. Thank you.
Yeah, I think generally. Anyway, there are parts of LA, Mr. Putin, I'd invite you not to invade. But anyway, he arrested me, and then I was passport, press pass, all that stuff. Takes me to the it's a water pumping station, and the door slams, and then I'm on my own with these guys with guns, and nobody's seen me. And I kind of feel a little hiccup of fear, and then a lovely Ukrainian granny appears from nowhere and gives me a cup of tea, and I think it's okay. But I can hear the command that I did Russian at school. I've forgotten it all, but I know enough. And they say something like, they're talking Ukrainian, but it's roughly the same phrase, Ruskaya spionka, Russian spy. I said, "What? I'm not a Russian spy." And they phone up the SBU, and the SBU, which is Ukrainian intelligence, say, "Bring him to us and we'll check him out." And they make the call. I'm booked into the system, so there's no way out of it. I'm going there and they're going to check me out. And then the guy who arrested me, Vlad Demchenko, looks me up and he sees that I've doorstepped Vladimir Putin in Siberia about the shooting down of MH17. And Vlad goes, "I think you have an interesting story." because he realizes I'm a former BBC journalist. I'm not a Russian spy. Anyway, We became great friends. I'm getting to your. Sorry, I'm just kind of.
No, I love this story. I love your way of telling stories. Please feel free.
What happens with Vlad and I is we get there. It's all a bit. Eventually, I'm checked out. It takes a while, and I'm a bit jumpy because it's day 2 of the war, and after Zelensky and the presidency, the next big target for Russian cruise missiles is the SBU headquarters. And it's a bit scary, and I kind of want to say, come on, chaps, could you speed this process up? But anyway, they let me go. That night, I did a film on Twitter, which says, and it literally goes like, rough old day. I was arrested as a Russian spy by the Ukrainian army, and then I go, thank God for alcohol. But
all right, we're playing that.
Yes, we will.
And I then say, but I think this is on day 2. The person in trouble is not Zelensky. It's not even me, John Sweeney, even though I've been arrested as a Russian spy today. The person who's in trouble is Vladimir Putin, because he has not sold this war to his people. Mm-hmm. And I stand by that from day 2. Mm-hmm. By the way, the CIA cost $15 billion a year. My book costs, I think, $19 or something like this. So much cheaper. I've now forgotten.
Zelensky in the tube. Just give him that one line. I need to hear it from you.
So the people, the tube is obviously what I call the underground, the metro, they call it in Kyiv, but I call it the tube. And so Zelensky wants to hold a press conference in March. And when you hold a press conference, if wherever you are, you're going to get hit by Russian cruise missiles, you hold it in the tube, but you go down, and these the metro stations, the tube stations in Kyiv and in Moscow are very deep because they're also nuclear bomb shelters. So you go down a very, very long way. And then what happens is we all move through a lot of security. We move through from the first station, we walk to the second connecting station, which is where the press conference was. We all sit there. There's a whole ton of chairs on the platform. And then Zelensky, by the way, and they're still running trains. And every now and then Zelensky has to stop talking while a train goes through. And eventually somebody has a word with the tube station master and the tube stops like that. But Zelensky gives his press conference. Weirdly, I'm working, I'm freelance, but a newspaper gets in touch in London, and it's the Jewish Chronicle. And I'm a lapsed Catholic. And I said, and they got in touch, and I think very, very late February, very early March. And I said, well, listen, I'm not Jewish. I eat bacon sandwiches and everything. And they said, we don't care. You're the only one that's left. So I am freelancing, but I am the Jewish Chronicle. And I feel anyway. But never mind. They don't change a word I write, and every article I write, I put in the rabbi towards the top of the article, but then towards the bottom of the article, I find a Muslim soldier or a Muslim imam who's also fighting with the Ukrainians. Wow. And the guy at the Jewish Chronicle says, we see that you've got all the Abrahamic faiths covered.
Yes, that's wonderful.
Nothing wrong with hedging your bets, man.
I love it. I love it.
But they didn't change a word of what I wrote. But so as you know, John Sweeney, Jewish Chronicle, I got my question with Zelensky in the tube, and you can see this on the Twitter thing. And I said, what's your message to the good and brave people in Russia who are opposing this war, to the kids in Moscow and St. Petersburg and getting their teeth smashed by the police?
Yeah.
So there was a guy who had a copy of War and Peace, and he just took it because it's not a war, it's a special military operation. Right. He took a copy of War and Peace and just started reading it by the Kyiv monument, and he was arrested. And I said, Navalny, what's your message to those people? Zelensky, who's a very smart politician, dodged the Navalny bit, but he said, I want to say to those people who are standing up to the invasion, thank you. I know it's difficult, but words are as powerful as nuclear bombs. It was a beautiful moment.
That's what I wanted you to share with our viewers. And I just wanted you to share your 40 years of going to war. You said you've never seen anything like the spirit of people you're seeing now in Ukraine.
Yes. So
can I also just put a word in for hearing how you doorstep Vladimir Putin?
Yes.
At some point,
Yes.
I'm dying to hear that story. So I'm not trying to step on your question, Heidi, but I don't want to.
We're not going to miss that one. That's a good one.
Because that one's awesome. Thank you.
All right, we are running long, but first Heidi, then Jim, then me, and then we'll probably be.
That's what we'll do. So the spirit of the Ukrainian people compared to your other wars you've covered, doorstepping Vladimir Putin, and we will let Hi-Fi take us out.
Sure. As I said, so the guy who arrested me is Vlad Demchenko on day 2 of the war. I get his number when I'm free. I get his number, and by the way, there were 4 of us in the car who went from the water pumping station where I was arrested to the SBU headquarters. 2 guys in the front, the commander, the deputy commander. They went on a mission and they were killed by the Russian army. So of the 4 of us in that car this day, only Vlad and I are still alive. Vlad, here's the dog. I'm going to show you the dog.
Please do.
This, by the way, if people are worried about my security, this is my security.
Oh, what is your baby's name?
Hey, buddy.
His name is Bertie. And
Bertie.
Bertie, am I a Russian spy? No.
No.
Bertie's a whippy poo, and he's my #1 security officer. So, Vladimir Putin, don't mess with me.
Oh, we love that.
Anyway,
wow, what a beautiful moment.
So Vlad, Vlad and I become pals, and I spend a lot of time at the Buena Vista, run by my pal Max, wonderful bar in Kyiv. And Max, anyway, I'm drinking with Vlad, and then the word gets out that this is the guy who arrested me on day 2 of the war. So all of my friends, all the British and American journalists in the bar, come up to Vlad and say, "Well done, mate, for arresting Sweeney, but why the fuck did you let him go?" Anyway, so Vlad has got he's now an officer in the Ukrainian army. They promoted him after they arrested me. After he arrested me for being a Russian spy. But by the way, that's a consequence. It's a corollary, not a consequence, as we would say in philosophy. However, Vlad's a really seriously brave and good bloke. And his battalion, I went to see him in his battalion, reserve battalion. We argued about Navalny and stuff with the soldiers. Ukraine's a democracy. Like, I'm arguing with Ukrainian soldiers in their reserve battalion about my Russian friends. And it was beautiful. It feels like what I read about being in London in 1940. That I feel like an American reporter in London in 1940, doing my best to support the British standing up to the monster on the other side of the channel. This is what the Ukrainians are doing. Vlad then, in August, with this wonderful American New Yorker, now lives in New Jersey, Chris Okechoni, he now lives in Ukraine. Chris and Vlad and I, we go to Bakhmut, which is on the front of the front line. And there's a picture of me not wearing my lucky orange hat. I'm wearing my helmet and a black jacket, and I've got a cup of tea. And the cup of tea has in Ukrainian "best grandma" written on the mug. And Chris says in his kind of New York accent, he said, "Hey, John, you can be a grandma if you want to. That's what Ukraine is fighting this war for."
Oh my gosh.
Oh, fuck off. I'm a grandfather. Do fuck off. But the Russian army is it's 5 miles away, or it could be one of the soldiers say 1,000 yards away. It's because go, and there's some woods, and sometimes there are woods, and that's so this is the spirit. And then there are Ukrainian soldiers in the trench. I'm in a trench. It's like being a fucking time machine. I'm in a trench in Europe in 2022, and in both my grandfathers, neither of them I knew, but they were in the trenches in 1914-18, and like the idea that their grandson is experiencing something like that, it's dark and evil and extraordinary. Having said that, the spirit of Vlad's pals in that trench, completely great. Lovely, thumbs up. How are you, boss? Here's a cup of tea. Here's a chocolate biscuit. Some of it supplied by the British Ministry of Defence, rather sweet. But it felt really, really good. And their morale, I have seen the British Army doing good stuff in Bosnia and in Kosovo. I've seen, and the German army in Kosovo too. I've seen the Americans in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the British in Iraq and Afghanistan. I've seen the Russian army in Chechnya. I've also seen various other armies behave very badly in places like Rwanda and Burundi and Angola and so forth and so on. And the Syrian army, at least some of the time, not the latest thing, but I've seen that stuff too. I do not think I have ever seen an army with greater self-belief, with greater morale than the Ukrainian army in 2022. They really, really believe in what they're doing, and it's simple. They're fighting to get their homes back.
Thank you.
That's yeah. I have to say I've been just from a distance. I have so much admiration for them. I was concerned a little bit about Zelensky. What, yeah, comedian, really, and man, has he really, really stepped up. And he's a leader. I'd follow him anywhere. You know. So speaking of people who you know, who are stepping up and doorstepping others, I'd love to hear.
Yes.
I worked on that. Did you hear that transition I did?
I did. It was excellent, Jim. We got you.
Thank you.
I think that's the most seamless segue I've ever seen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I stumbled right into it.
This is RadPod at its finest.
So Vladimir Putin, he shoots down MH17, or a Russian big missile, which he sent across, shoots down MH17, which is a Malaysian jet, and 298 people die. I'm working for BBC Panorama at the time, and that very day, they've actually announced my redundancy. Never mind. Although it's a bit annoying, after the shooting down of the plane, I volunteered to go to eastern Ukraine to the crash site, and I get there and you see luggage in the middle of a cornfield. There is kerosene, aircraft fuel everywhere. There's the nose cone, there are wings, there is the engines, there are the wheels. There are people being put into bin bags and then dumped into the back of a bin lorry to be taken to the morgue. And there are paperbacks and women's hats and kids' toys. And there is trunkies, you know, those little things that the toddlers are wheeled on at airports. And whenever I see a trunkie at an airport like Heathrow, I start welling up. I start to cry a bit because it gives me PTSD from seeing that stuff there. September, we want to doorstep Vladimir Putin. It's impossible in Moscow or in St. Petersburg because security is too tight. But I have a brilliant friend, Nick Sturdy, who knows that in the sticks, things can be more sloppy. And Nick works out that Putin is opening a mammoth museum in Yakutsk. It's 9 time zones east of London. I've been to my niece's wedding in somewhere in the home counties, kind of like 4 weddings and a funeral kind of thing. And I'm still wearing my wedding kit, and because I'm Sweeney, I'm a bit Irish, so I have a green tie, wedding suit, my beard, and I fly there, and it's a long way, 9 times further east than Beijing. And when I get there, when I get there, I'm really hungry, and I say, stop, I need to get a kebab, and I wolf the kebab like that because I was really hungry. And then I rock up, and basically there's a line of professors of mammothology, and without my hat, because I'm not wearing it then, I look very much like a professor of mammothology. Like I look really convincing. They're all shaking because they're scared of meeting Putin. I'm shaking because I've still got the DTs from the wedding. And so Putin rocks up, pimp rolls like the little gangster he is. And I sort of jump in front of all the professors of mammothology in the Mammoth Museum. He's open. Tell me about MH17. Tell me about the killings in Ukraine. And all of the Russian media, patsy Kremlin media, switch their TV lights on because they think this is an agreed question. And it isn't. But Putin, who's smart and supple then, he's become much more rigid in the last 2 or 3 years. But 2014, he stopped. I will answer your question. Peskov translates. And Putin's lying. He just lies. He's a psychopath. He lies so smoothly. And this is what Jim Fallon, the professor of psychiatry at the University of California, says. He's a psychopath. And this is one of the tells. He lies so smoothly. He's lying. He's blaming the Ukrainians for what he's done, what the Russians have done. In the course of this, he's staring at me. I'm much bigger than him. And suddenly the kebab starts sort of coming up in my chest. And I can feel it. And there's this moment where I think I'm going to projectile vomit all over the president of the Russian Federation.
Oh, that it would have happened.
So positive.
You should have had a second kebab, man. No.
So the positive is that had I done that, I would never have to buy a beer in Kyiv ever again. But the downside was that I would probably not be here to tell this story. Actually,
that is also very true. Yes.
But later that day,
that is a downside.
It's a downside. Later that day, Putin was meeting some Chinese deputy premier, and they were cutting the ribbon on a pipeline between Russia and China. The reality is nearly all the pipe work that goes to Europe. So that it's kind of fantasy stuff. And the Chinese are buying Russian oil and gas, but nothing like at the same prices or the same volume as Europe did. But anyway, a Russian goon comes up to me and punches me in the stomach. So don't go, don't do anything. That was a little message from them to me. But I regret not vomiting over Vladimir Putin. The kebab went down, but to this day, there are times when I can't sleep and I just go, you know what, John? You should have thrown up over that cunt.
We've got like 6 promo clips going. What's funny is that Fiona Hill talked about his smell, how he smelled like he was bathed in baby powder and I don't know, some sort of flora and fauna. So that would have definitely distressed him. Jim, Hi-Fi, I've got 1 or 2 more things I want to say, but Hi-Fi, you go.
All right. So here's what I know about Vladimir Putin. Incredibly abusive childhood, possibly sexually molested as a child. We know he was doing the mixed martial arts thing because he's trying to learn to fight back against whatever. We know he turns into a gangster. You call him a fragile monster. Do you believe that it is probably because his inner child is so broken? And that may also add to the rumors of pedophilia, because that's why Litvinenko was killed, right?
Mm-hmm. True.
Yeah, so this is a serious issue. Jim Fallon believes that he was something very dark happened to him when he was very, very young, when he was 2 or 3. His natural mother abandoned him, or there was some kind of awful sexual abuse, or both happened.
Right. Yeah, he was abandoned to a military man, if you believe the story of his natural mother. Yes.
So there's a number of versions of this. There is the Georgian version, and there's a friend of mine, Donald Rayfield, who's a former professor of Russian at London University, who doesn't believe that story is true. And my respect for Donald is so great that I buy that. But Jim Fallon believes there's another version of the abandonment story, which is in St. Petersburg. It's not that he's his mum's living in Georgia, but there is another version of this. What Jim Fallon says is this is a common trait in people like Hitler and Mao, Stalin, and Putin, that something awful and dark happened to them, which causes them to be a psychopath. And it's a very, very common trait.
Trump as well. I should throw in Mary Trump's book does I think a very good job of showing how he was raised by a psychopath and just was turned into one.
Yes. So Mary Trump's book is, if anyone hasn't read it, I've listened to it on audiobook. It was just stunning. I've met Trump and I challenged him. And you
doorstep Trump. You doorstep Trump too, essentially.
I'm the only, as far as I know, I'm the only reporter who has pissed off Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and both of them didn't like it. I asked him about his friendship with. I asked Donald Trump about his friendship with Russian-born gangster Felix Sater. And I say, why didn't you say to him, you're connected with the mafia, you're fired? And Trump went, well, maybe you're thick, John. But he talked about some kind of small print and some deal, which I believe was wholly untrue. And anyway, then Trump said, I've got to go up, I've got to leave. And Trump stands up and offers his hand, and I'm sitting down. There's my flat with my hands out, and I said, one last question. Why did you buy your concrete for Trump Tower from Fat Tony Salerno? Fat Tony was fat.
Well done.
But anyway, that's a digression. So where was I going?
Bottom line is,
and the darkness.
Yes, he had trauma. A lot of people have trauma, and they don't try to destroy the world. But
yes, exactly. So Litvinenko. So there is a moment, and I write about it in my book. But there was a moment when Putin in 2006. It's summer 2006. I think it's July. And he stops his motorcade outside about 200 yards from the Kremlin and walks through the people. And there's a little boy who is maybe 5 years old. He's very pale and blonde. Putin kneels before the little boy, lifts up his T-shirt and kisses him on the stomach.
Yeah, it's creepy.
And it's very peculiar and creepy.
Yeah.
Litvinenko writes a draft blog saying Putin is a paedophile. And my friend Paul Joyle, who's in the book, who's an American intelligence analyst, formerly, I think, for the American government and now in private business, he knows Litvinenko, and he said, don't do this because the evidence is strong enough and this is very, very dangerous. I agree with Paul that it's not right, whoever you are, even if you're Vladimir Putin, it's not right to say that this act alone is proof of somebody being
sure. Speculation, of course.
There's not enough evidence there. And secondly, I agree with Paul in that it was a dangerous thing to do. Litvinenko went ahead. In the draft report that that he wrote, Litvinenko referred to a second person, Artyom Borovik, who also accused Vladimir Putin of being a paedophile, and he was killed in a mystery plane crash in March 2000, just before Russia voted Putin president. That's a little that's disturbing. Mm-hmm. Anyway, what Paul Doyle says is, I do not think Vladimir Putin is a paedophile because the evidence isn't strong enough to make that awful accusation against someone. But I have some information that he might be bisexual. And that is, it's not just the pictures of him bare-chested riding the horse. It's also him. It's not just those kind of slightly homoerotic or rather very pictures. It's also that Paul has come across evidence in his career of Putin acting in a bisexual way to a couple. And Paul gave an interview, I think, to NBC Nightlight News, where he put that line in, and the show, when it was broadcast, didn't run that angle. But nevertheless, it was recorded and there was a transcript. And Paul believes the Russians got hold of that transcript. What happened was, after he gave the interview, he lives in a leafy suburb somewhere in Maryland, outside DC. Two men came to his house and tried to kill him. Mm-hmm. The gun jammed, and his dog, who's actually bigger than Bertie, jumped over the fence and went for these guys, and they ran away. But they shot him in the stomach and the guts, and he spent 3 months in hospital. So of the three people, 2 people have called Putin a paedophile. One was poisoned, one died in a mystery plane crash. And the third guy simply said he's bisexual. Nothing wrong with being bisexual, of course.
Of course not, right.
But he was shot.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to elicit a strong reaction. Okay, I have a quick follow-up to that, because as we're talking about Putin's darkness and what broke in him to be able to make him a gangster, we talk about gangsterism. Obviously, there's been a lot of people in Russia falling out of windows lately, but lately the last few have been Putin's boys.
We think it's part of an elite defection. Yep.
I think personally the window industry in Russia really has a lot of explaining to do. But I mean, seriously, I think the entire, all the window manufacturers in Russia, guys, get it together. I apologize.
On to the serious part of the question now. The serious part of the question is, last week on the show, I pointed out that what we're seeing is gangland war in Russia right now. The fact that Putin's people are now the ones dying, it's telling me that the factions who are pissed off at Putin are taking some action. Do you agree or disagree?
Darya Dugin just saying that.
There you go.
Something's happening, and so I agree with you more than I disagree. But something is happening now. It's entirely possible that many of these cases are genuine suicides, because the pressure on these executives is enormous.
Yeah.
Because, for example, what's happened is, what we're looking at are people who are dark kleptocrats who have made a ton of money over the last 30 years. And in one action, by the invasion of February 24th, Vladimir Putin has ruined their has taken away their gold, and it's much diminished. Also, their ability to spend it, sending their bastard spawns at Eton or Winchester, parking their yachts in the south of France, parking their dirty money in London. By the way, all of these things still continue, but it's becoming much more difficult for these people to do this. Within that, there are incredible pressures upon them, and there are pressures so great that there will be some people who are committing suicide because they can't take the pressure.
That's right.
There is, however, within that wider, that big Venn diagram, there's going to be a subset of people who believe that the war is stupid and have said so, and the Russian secret state has got to that. And then there are people, so for example, what they classically do, and they did this with Khodorkovsky, is the moment they go public or semi-public, or even now in secret, the moment they express their dissent, then, for example, other gangsters may come and steal their company from beneath them because they're now being traitors. Which, by the way, and then you can still commit suicide on that because of the pressure of knowing your company, which you've stolen, but never mind. Back in the day, has been stolen from you. That's another route to suicide.
Right.
Within that Venn diagram, there is I think a smaller group of people who have been murdered by the Russian secret state because they are dissenting from Vladimir Putin's catastrophic war. So therefore, I think the picture is muddy and opaque, but I believe that at least some of these people are being murdered. A bigger number are committing suicide because their dissent is causing them such stress that they think suicide is the best way out, and some people are just dealing with the wider stress of the catastrophic war.
Wow.
But that is what. So when I say that Vladimir Putin is a fragile monster, I stand by that. And remember, I was going in this direction on day 2 of the war when I said that the person who is in great trouble isn't Zelensky. It's not even the Russians by me. It's him because he hasn't sold the war to his people.
That's right.
I believe that he's fragile because the Chinese are not happy with the strategy. They do not want a European recession, and Putin kind of wants that. That's the last thing he's got going, and they don't want that. They do not want a nuclear strike. They do want no use of nuclear weapons. So he's got a lot of pressure from the Chinese, who he's trying to keep on side. And you saw him kowtowing to Xi the other day. But essentially, the great pressure on him is the courage of the Ukrainian army, because we are seeing fascism defeated on the ground by the heroes in the Ukrainian army, and this is the single best way of getting to seeing the end of him. And I think we're now seeing the beginning of the end.
There could be no finer way to end this incredible interview. I hear echoes of, I believe in echoes from history. I hear 1917. I believe this is what comes next. And wow, thank you.
I don't, by the way, I'm hoping it's like 1905, 1865, I think it is, the Russian Tsar lost Crimea against the British and the Ottomans, and they abolished serfdom. In 1905, they created the first effective parliament. I'm hoping at the end of Putin things will get better. I'm hoping it won't be like 1917, because that wasn't good.
No, it was not good. I feel like that might be what he's fearing right now. Wow. Thank you,
John,
so much.
Thank you so much. What an incredible interview, and thank you for being so generous with your time and putting up with my silly jokes. Thank you again.
Sir, hats off to you. That's all I can say.
I wish I thanks, and thank you, Percy. Keep guarding this man, and buy his book. And
buy the book, Killer
give
the
him some
Kremlin.
quid.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's cheaper than the CIA.
Exactly. Thank you, sir.
Cheers, chaps.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Wow, what an incredible interview. That is going to be just, I cannot wait to share it with our viewers. You guys can find, I know, right? You can find him at John Sweeney Roars on Twitter. You can support his Patreon. People all over the world support that man going to war zones and bringing us that incredibly rich storytelling and knowledge. I mean, we just covered world history, in an hour. I think it would only be fitting, gentlemen, to let John take us out right after he was released as being accused of being a Russian spy.
Tough all day for Ukraine, for Kiev. A little bit for me. Quick drink. Oh, thank God for alcohol. Oz, my pal, and I, we went down to the river, the Dnipro. We heard there'd been some fighting. The Russians are there. Take the tube because we can't get a car. Arsenal tube station full of Ukrainians hiding from the Russian army, 2 little kids and a dog. Incredibly sad. It's the 21st century, I can't believe it. We get up, walk along the river, Oz and I split up. I go on the Jeremy Vine show, blah, 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 blah. Oz is ahead of me. I'm carrying on doing videos. Ukrainian soldier said, stop, stop, stop. And I just say, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm arrested by the Ukrainian army and they accuse me of being a Russian spy. And I said, just have a look at my Twitter picture and you'll see, me challenging Vladimir Putin. I am not a Russian spy. Anyway, I was detained. My passport and phone were taken from me. They took me to the Ukrainian intelligence, and eventually they worked it out that I wasn't a Ukrainian spy. Vladimir Putin is driving these people mad. However, I think the person who is in trouble is not President Zelensky of Ukraine. It's not even John Sweeney, who spent an hour or two in the Ukrainian intelligence service headquarters. The person in trouble is Vladimir Putin. He has not sold this war to his people, and they don't like it. And he's not hitting Kiev with all that he could, because I think he's afraid to do so. So, Vladimir Putin, you're in trouble.